The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Everyone, please rise and face the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lisa, would you call the roll, please?
Good afternoon. Greg Stoll.
Here.
Guy Tucker. Phil Weinberg.
Here.
Eugene Sims. Welcome. Pete Pettick. Gil Ramirez. Rodney Honeycutt. Adam Kohler. Bill Vollmer. Tony Sasso. Michelle Balzanto. Peter Fuscus. David Miller.
Here.
Arlen DeBlau. And Rochelle Londales. Thank you very much. Did I miss anybody physically in the room? And virtually, I believe we don't have anyone. Okay. Okay, we do have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Do we have anyone participating virtually yet? No, thank you. In that case, we don't need to take a vote. First up is public comments. Do we have any public comments on non-agenda items? Nope. Okay. Thank you. And next up is our executive director's report. Jordana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, sorry about that. Steve always turns the mic up because I have a very soft voice, so I apologize for that. Well, good afternoon, members. It's a pleasure to see everyone. I wanted to give you a briefing of just a few things I wanted to point out. In your package, you do have the draft governing board meeting minutes of March 10th, as well as the draft TAC meeting minutes of March the 8th, as well as the attendance record for both of the committee and the governing board. On page 3 is the executive director's report, if you would like to follow along. The Central Florida MPO Alliance met on April the 9th, and you do have those meeting highlights and presentation links that are included for your information. We did receive a presentation on the regional trails, the Sun Trail system. On April the 29th, the Florida Metropolitan Planning Organization Advisory Council, that is the statewide MPOAC. It's where the 27 MPOs get together. And we received several presentations, one of which was from the National Association of Regional Councils. They're referred to as NARC. And they gave an overview of several of the COVID recovery plans. And we're going to discuss those in a little more detail when we get to the presentation on transportation funding. So I'd like to hold that discussion. But they also did talk about some of the legislative bills. As you know, session has ended. And the mid-block crossing bill, just wanted to let everyone know it did not pass the Senate. And so it will not be going anywhere. And even though it certainly had good intentions, it would have been very difficult to implement, and it would have been very costly for the local governments as well as the Florida DOT. But no doubt they will be back again next year in some form or fashion. And I know that the DOT is working very closely, I think, with members of the legislature to kind of come up with alternatives for the RRFBs. Also, the Regional Planning Council bill, if you remember, they were wanting to do away with the advisory part of regional councils. So that did not reappear in the last few days of session. And so we were very happy to hear about that. But all in all, there was nothing hurtful to MPOs. And it seems that there's more money coming into transportation. And again, we'll talk more about those COVID recovery bills a little later. Also, wanted to let you know the Trail Wayfinding Signage and Amenities Master Plan. Sarah Crom is the TPO's project manager, but the TPO is scheduled 2 wayfinding workshops, and those are scheduled in May. And it's for multi-use trails and trailheads located in the northern Brevard County area. So this is an important first step that will help establish a preferred design aesthetic for the signage and identify priority destinations along the trail, as well as, selecting a type of site amenities that will enhance the overall, user experience. So looking forward to that effort as we move forward. Also, the Transportation Thursday FDOT partnership. Sarah hosted the last Transportation Thursday was about regional trails, and it was very well attended. So our next one is going to be a webinar on June the 3rd from 10 to 11, and it's about FDOT partnership. And so Secretary Perdue, District 5 Secretary, has agreed to participate in that. So the TPO will be hosting that and just talking about the different types of FDOT partnership. And it's really geared for our local governments, but it's also for our citizens as well. And so we're excited because we've not done a presentation like that before. And the last thing I wanted to bring to your attention, after much discussion, we would like to get the committees back together in July, meaning the TAC and the CAC has always met together. And we always felt like it was really good. The two committees really kind of feed off each other. The technical group loves to hear what the citizens have to say and vice versa. And so we don't meet in June. We're always off in June. So July will be our next meeting. And so we would like to bring the group back together. We certainly don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. We'll rearrange the room. The Center for Collaboration will absolutely allow a larger group in here. So we've cleared that through them. So I wanted to give everyone a heads up on that. I think it'll be more efficient, and we really would like to get the group back together. So Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Georgiana. Just one question about the July 7th meeting then. Are we going to definitely have the joint meeting?
Yes, that is our plan. Yes.
Right, then the next meeting will be July 7th at 9:30 a.m. or back to our old time.
And also, Mr. Chair, I want to point out that that is on a Wednesday.
Correct.
It's very rare that we would meet on a Wednesday, but it was due to a scheduling conflict. So the TPO governing board will be meeting just the next day on Thursday. So it'll be a Wednesday meeting.
Okay, thank you, Georgiana. That brings us to our consent agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to pull something from the consent agenda? Pete?
I know how much the technical group appreciates a citizen, and I'd like to share, give more stuff to appreciate us. And then the second thing, RFPs on the beaches. So RFPs are A. When I go to a crosswalk, I hit the button, I wait for traffic to stop. The reason I wait for traffic to stop, I'm little, cars and trucks are big. If I hit them, they're not going to feel it. If they hit me, I'm going to hurt. So it's my responsibility, even though it's a light and the little green man says I can go. I'm watching traffic stops, I go. RFPs aren't a red light, they're A. And it's the user's responsibility to make sure that traffic stops. See, it's A, it's a crosswalk in the middle of the block. Really, really a good A. The people along the beaches, they don't know what they got. And they're crying and complaining, wanting to get rid of it. Well, the fact is, the only way you get rid of it is the red light, and red lights have warnings. So if you go to the red light route, you're not going to get any aid across in the middle of the block. So you're going to have to make up your mind. Do you want something to help, or do you want nothing at all? If you don't like what you got now, it'll be nothing at all. And if you have to educate the people that you stop and look, make the cars stop before you use any crosswalk, well, that's what you got to do. And anybody that walks a lot or uses a bicycle, rule number one, you look and make sure traffic stops when you get out into the roadway. I mean, that's just the way it is. And that's all I got to say.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Tony?
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Philip. Yeah, it's such an important and sensitive issue, as we know. And I know one thing I will, just for everybody in your very different areas, because they're all different and unique. And these crosswalks are so important. You know, for years, I've been on this committee pushing for sidewalks and crosswalks and bicycle pedestrian safety issues. And we're finally getting some, and we're seeing what's working and what's not working. And we've got to figure out how to find compromises that do work. And I know, I will tell you that the TPO has really stepped up. I say the TPO in conjunction with some of the engineers we've worked with, FDOT, the communities themselves, and like physically meet at some of these crosswalks and look at what's working and what's not. Maybe there's a palm tree in the way of the sign, or maybe it needs a bulb out, or any number of different things. One of the things that we've done over in Cocoa Beach, for example, and has been very helpful, are pedestrian signs, big pedestrian signs that basically say, wait for the traffic to stop. And it's difficult because everybody doesn't always stop. So you have to kind of push it a little bit. Now, I think some of the new crosswalks that we're looking at are going to be red light crosswalks in Cocoa Beach, but we still have the yellow flashing style. I don't know all the short terms for them, but we're looking at them and trying to make them work. So I would just encourage, especially this group, look at your crosswalks, try them out, see what works and what doesn't work. And then if it's not working, get some of the experts there with you to figure out, okay, what's wrong and why not? And hopefully over the years, we'll get these things ironed out. So Peter, I appreciate what you're saying. You're absolutely right. It's a difficult thing, but every area is a little bit unique. And I know that's what we're trying to do, is figure out how to make it work. So thank you.
Pete?
Sound. That's approximately 14, 15 miles each way. We crossed A1A at least 7 times in each direction. That'd be 14 times round trip. We never once had to hit the RFB button because traffic would see us and stop. There was one section we even wanted to stay on US 1 because it was a short section. I mean on A1A, and we didn't want to cross. And traffic stopped, so we ended up crossing anyway. That's because those people have had time to adjust. You on the beaches, you expect results now. Well, you're not going to get results now. It takes a while for things to blend in for the traveling public to know how to react to the RFBs. It'll happen. You just have to be patient. You're trying to push it. Now, red lights require warrants. I mean, that's the way it's going to come down to. And you say, well, we want red lights at our RFBs. Well, you have to warrant it. And unfortunately, people have to die before you get a warrant. In other words, you're not going to get a warrant for the red lights in the middle of the block. They're just going to go away and you're going to go back to the way it was. Or you could be patient, let people get experienced. And once they get experienced, they'll work better. Are they ever going to be perfect? No. Is a red light perfect? No. Is a crosswalk at a red light perfect? No. But we learn how to adjust and we learn how to go along with it. Now, downtown Titusville had a RFB. At first, nobody paid attention. They blow it past. Now you hit it, 90, 95% of traffic will stop. Will it ever get to be 100%? I'm not sure. But at least 90, 95% is better than nothing. And I'm going to leave it at that because I've seen it work on A1A.
Okay, Peter, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, on the SOS work order, when does it start and when does it finish?
Well, we're not, we haven't gotten to that yet.
It's on the consent calendar.
Well, yeah, we got kind of sidetracked with the talking about the RFPs and so on. We'll come to back to the consent agenda in 1 second. Rochelle, you had something you wanted to add?
Mine is on the consent agenda as wanted to make sure that the minutes and attendance record that we're voting on are the most recent ones that Lisa sent out.
That reflect your attendance.
And that reflect my attendance.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, all right, now we'll get to the consent agenda. What items do you want pulled?
I'm not sure I want it pulled.
You want to discuss it?
The
Well, you want to
question
pull it
is,
for
when does
discussion.
it start? When does it finish?
Georgiana?
It's a contract for over $90,000. And I was wondering when they begin that contract.
Mr. Fuskus, upon approval by the TPO board on Thursday, we would issue a notice to proceed the following week. It typically takes a few months for the data gathering, takes probably about 4 months. We will bring back results in September, is usually our target date, either September or October to do a presentation. And then the final report is available usually in November.
Yeah, I'm not going to request that it be taken off the agenda,
Okay,
but it's an interesting project. Very interesting. And the sources of those statistics and the implications of them are really an interesting facet. So when it comes back to us after it's done, 2020, then I think I would like to spend a lot of time on that.
okay, thank you, Peter. Yeah, Greg?
Yeah, it was my understanding if I pull it off the consent agenda, I get to talk about it and then we get to
Yes.
vote. Great. I would like to pull item 5B for a minor discussion.
Go ahead.
And that is on the bullets. The second to last and last bullet, annual number of bicycle pedestrian crashes along the corridor and the annual number of vehicle crashes along the corridor. I did look at the 2019 SOS, I believe it was, and they spelled out in detail by intersection and by type. And I just want to verify that this new work order scope of services includes that level of detail.
Yes, we will typically do the same type of analysis from year to year, so we can actually identify trends. We don't change our methodology. So we'll make sure that that detail is available for you.
Okay. So yeah, I guess what threw me was you were talking about redoing the format to make it more readable. I just wanted to make sure we weren't going to lose any data.
That's correct. We want to make it more visual with graphics, so you don't have to read the actual text that goes along with the 100-page report. So the information will still all be there, but just in a better format to read.
All right, excellent. That's all I had, sir.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Tony?
That's not going to change the number, so we'll see year to year, so we can compare everything the same, right?
Yes, especially when it comes to safety, we move towards the trend that the state and the federal requirements are for performance monitoring and doing a 5-year rolling average. But you will still have the year to year because you may have a decrease in from prior year to current year. But when you're looking at the 5-year trend, it could actually be increasing. So we want to make sure we capture that information.
Okay, if there are no other comments or questions on the consent agenda, I will consider a motion to approve. Well, let me just finish reading the consent agenda, please, Adam. It's item 5A, approval of the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting minutes of March 8th to include the updated attendance. 5B, approval of work order 21-13K 2020 state of the system scope of services. And item 5C, approval resolution 21-19, recommending Brevard County Board of County Commissioners continue as the community transportation coordinator for Brevard County. Now, your motion, please, Adam. Motion from Adam, second from Greg. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, the next item is action item is 6A, approval of resolution 21-20, a transportation improvement program amendment. Georgiana.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The Florida Department of Transportation has requested an amendment to the currently adopted Transportation Improvement Program. This is for projects in the work program for fiscal year 21 through 25. And so the original amendment request that you had in your package is for 5 projects. The first one is Space Commerce Way. That is the widening of Space Commerce Way. That project was funded via an infrastructure grant along with the NASA Causeway replacement, if you remember. But we are now including that project in the TIP to reflect the design and the construction funding, which is really important. And then we have 3 transit projects, a 5310 Small Urban Capital Grant, a 5339 Large Urban Capital Grant, and then a Small Urban Capital Grant for Titusville. So they're all grant transit projects. The amendment that you have, or the add-on, I should say, at your place, we received a call from DOT last week, and they wanted us to add a change in the project limit for the NASA Causeway Bridge replacement. Federal Highway requires to have planning consistency. So if the length of the bridge is a little different, then we need to make sure that that is reflected in the TIP. And so it triggered a TIP amendment. So these are the requested new projects and the adjustment to the project length in the Transportation Improvement Program. And we are asking for your approval for this amendment.
Okay, thank you, Georgiana. If there are no questions, can I get a motion to approve resolution 21-20?
Second.
Motion from Rochelle, second from Adam Kohler. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That brings us to presentations. First up is presentation on transportation funding. Georgiana.
I'm going to step up here. Can you hear me? That's good. How about now? Is that better? Okay. All right. So let's see. I wanted to give a short overview of transportation funding in Florida. And I thought this might be especially helpful to the new members because this is the time of year where we are developing our list of transportation project priorities. And that is something very important that the TPO does every year. So I thought this would be a pretty valuable conversation. So I want to start out with our mission statement. Why are we here? This is the reason. We're here to develop and foster realization of regional multimodal transportation projects and programs that improve the quality of life for Brevard residents, businesses, and visitors. This is what we try to do every single day. And the primary role of the TPO is to prioritize projects that use state and federal funding. So we play an important role in allocating financial resources for transportation. To make the most of this role, it requires working closely with the DOT partners through which federal dollars flow. And this is one of the most important things we do. As my predecessor used to say, Mr. Bob Comm, it's where the planning meets the money. And that is what it's about. It's about bringing in those transportation dollars for us here in Brevard County. So transportation in the broad context, it includes all modes, space, seaports, aviation, et cetera. But for today's presentation, I want to focus on surface transportation. To develop a comprehensive, safe, efficient transportation system, it requires funding from a variety of sources, state, federal, local, and private. So for the State Transportation Trust Fund, FDOT has 3 main sources of funding. And this is projected by the Revenue Estimating Conference, which is a group of economists in Tallahassee that forecasts gas tax revenues, motor vehicle license fees, and initial vehicle registration fees, and so on. we really rely on State Transportation Trust Fund, and 2/3 of our revenue comes from fuel tax. There is some from the rental car surcharge, I think it's $2, and some from dock stamps, but most of the funding comes from taxes on motor fuel. 25% is made up of federal funding, which is our federal apportionment and obligating authority. And then about 18% or so is made up of toll facilities. And those revenues are projected by independent traffic revenue studies. And as you know, all three of those have been impacted this year by the pandemic. So focusing just on fuel taxes, this is really divided into three different areas. We have our federal fuel taxes, which is 18.4 cents per gallon. State fuel taxes, 14.3 cents per gallon, and you have an additional 7.9 cents on every gallon. And then on the local side, some local fuel taxes are mandated by the state, and then some of this is also local option taxes. Our federal authorization is that we are operating under right now is the Fixing America's Surface Transportation, or the Fast Act, which was signed into law back in 2015. It was a 5-year bill that provided over $300 billion in transportation funding. And it was set to expire December of 2020, but it was extended for 1 year. And it is likely that we will be getting a new authorization, a new bill later this year, and rather than just another extension, which the federal government has done in past years. Also, Florida is referred to as a donor state. For each federal gas tax dollar collected, the state only gets back 95%. One challenge is that the TPO apportionment is based on the fiscal year 2009 allocation from the 2000 census. And this is a high growth state, so we're not receiving the allocation due to us based on population. And of course, we're hoping to get the new census information next year sometime, and we may have new numbers, and it could change a lot of different things. And a little bit about the money. First, on federal funding. Every time you get a gallon of gas, you get 18.4 cents back from the federal government in fuel tax. The problem is it's not indexed to inflation. 90% of the federal funding comes from the pennies per gallon of fuel, which has not been adjusted since 1993. And for those of you that are as old as I am, Seinfeld and Home Improvement were the top rated TV shows back in 1993. That was a long time ago. And I love those shows. We are selling less gas per vehicle due to increasing fuel efficiency and electric cars. The Highway Trust Fund balance has been in a steady decline, requiring that the federal general fund infusions are put in just to ensure its solvency. And then on the state side, state funding, the state fuel tax, as you know, is more diversified, as I just mentioned, with the different types of funding going into it. And it does keep pace with inflation. It adjusts each year automatically. But the challenge at the state level is the alternate fuel vehicles and electric vehicles that continue to have an impact. In 2020, Florida had more than 60,000 registered electric vehicles. And the latest study by FDOT showed they will impact the Transportation Trust Fund by 2025, and that by 2040, and this is the most aggressive forecast, it shows a 30% reduction in gas tax revenue, and that's pretty big. So it continues to be a challenge. Locally imposed fuel taxes. This is a slide as of January 2020. The local option taxes are added to an area's tax base for local infrastructure. So in the Central Florida area, FDOT District 5, as you can see there to the right of that map, 4 of the counties have fully leveraged their local option gas tax. Sumter, Lake, and Seminole have not fully leveraged their local option, but they have added 1 penny. Orange and Brevard County are the only 2 counties in Central Florida that have not leveraged any of their local option. So they're leaving 6 cents on the table. There was a budget meeting by the Brevard County Commission earlier this year, and Mark Bernath, with County Public Works Director, he did a fantastic presentation to the County Commission talking about some of the projects that they could get done, what some of the challenges are from a capacity standpoint. And, you know, with the pandemic and with all that's happened, not all of the commissioners were really thrilled about raising taxes or increasing the fuel tax, but they were interested in perhaps looking at an infrastructure sales tax. And I don't know if the second budget meeting has happened, but they did ask for some more information. And it's no one wants their taxes to be raised, but it is a challenge, and this is a situation that we're dealing with. The day of the budget meeting, the rover landed on Mars, and it was really kind of a big event on television. And I bring that up because I don't think we fully comprehend what is going to happen here in Brevard County over the next 10 years. The amount of companies that are coming here, you know, what kind of area do we want to be? And so I think that this is an important part of the conversation when we talk about transportation. So dealing with the balance sheet. So the question is how do we move forward with both federal and state revenue being challenged? It seems like our choices are limited, and we will have to do more with less, which means we could build fewer projects or defer projects, build different types of projects, focus more on transit, use technology, you know, our ITS, to improve safety and efficiency of the transportation system, which we are doing, but we're probably going to have to do it a lot more. Look for ways to be more cost effective. You know, we definitely need to be doing that at all times, but we also need to find new revenue sources such as grants or public-private partnerships, and seek legislative changes to raise or index specifically the federal and the local fuel tax. So just some things that we need to keep our eye on. You know, there have been several federal acts that have provided support for transportation and to replace the federal funds that have been lost during the pandemic. As you know, the state lost $1.5 billion in revenue, but in late 2020, President Trump passed the COVID-19 relief measures, $479 million for the state of Florida, and those funds enabled the department to keep the work program moving. This also included funding for transit and airports. The next act, the American Rescue Plan, $10.2 billion coming to Florida, and the governor said $2 billion will be used for transportation. And then coming up behind that will be American Jobs Plan, which is a proposal. It needs to be approved in Washington, probably late summer, early fall. And that has $571 billion proposed for transportation. So there's a lot of money coming our way. We're in talking with the DOT, they're not really sure about the criteria and how that money is going to get filtered down on our level. And what, you know, how central office wants to use that money for transportation. So the Florida DOT, the District 5 office, has set up bi-weekly meetings to talk about stimulus funding with each one of the MPOs. And, you know, they have our priority list, and they are really hopeful. We are really hopeful that we're going to get some of our major priorities moving forward with this infusion of money. And so having those biweekly meetings with the DOT, I think, is extremely important because we have to work closely together to get as many of our projects moving forward as possible. So stay tuned as over the next 6 months to later in the year, because we do think a lot of this as it gets further fall, we're going to be getting down into it, and you all will definitely be hearing a lot more about that. And then finally, the Fast Act Reauthorization. I mentioned the Fast Act will be expiring September 30th, 2021, because as I mentioned, it was extended for a year. And we are very hopeful that in that transportation bill, there will be some guidance for the country on how to replace the motor fuel tax, because we cannot keep going down this direction. And so we will wait and see, and hopefully we will have a new direction, as I said, for the country. And so that concludes my presentation, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Georgiana. Peter, I know you had a question.
Yeah, excuse me. In this balance sheet, I don't see where, I will maintain again that it takes us 15 years to complete a project. If we can do it in half the time, we can cut the expense of that project by 50%.
Yes.
Or more. And so I think we ought to look at the ways in which we can do that. The right-of-way acquisitions are a significant source for the cost because it's compounded on an annual basis. There are ways that other states have acquired land resources with programs over a period of years that have cut the acquisition costs greatly. So I'd like to see added to this the program of how do we complete it quicker, fund it. If we have new funding coming in, there are other financing alternatives that we can look at. And I think we can really make a contribution in building new roads in the state of Florida.
And you have a very good point. I know in our conversations with DOT, they are going to be looking at projects they can advance. In other words, this is federal money coming down the pipeline here. Could they use state funding to advance some of these projects and then use the federal money to get the next phase? They're trying to figure out ways to move projects quicker. And of course, you know, with DOT, there's so many different guidelines and rules and regulations, and that is the challenge. Right of way, how do you advance all that right of way? Do you go to eminent domain right away? Or do you really try to purchase, you know, each and every parcel? Exactly. So it's a very good point. All of those things need to be looked at as we move forward. You're absolutely right.
Okay, Greg, you had something?
Yes. Yes.
Please elaborate.
I love that you remembered that. Earmarks on the state level are very bad because earmarks do not come with any money. So, you know, basically, if we have someone, you know, one of our legislators that goes after an earmark, unless it's our #1 priority, mind you, which might be okay, I suppose, all of the funding in the State Transportation Trust Fund is already accounted for. It's already on projects in the 5 years. So the money's going to have to come from somewhere, and it may get pulled off of another project in Brevard County, which means that's going to hurt. These are federal earmarks, so apparently the funding is in the actual legislation. So the money will be put into the bill, into the legislation. And in fact, congressional members were asked to submit their special projects for the upcoming new bill. And so we have had several people reach out to Congressman Posey to let him know about our number one priority, the TPO's number one priority, which is the widening of Ellis. So I think we all need to be saying the same thing, and we have made that contact with Congressman Posey. So it's a little different. Earmarks are bad, but if the money is going to be included in the bill, then that's different. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, Pete?
I just wanted to talk a minute about the last option gas tax in front of the county commission. But before I go there, it's our elected officials are the biggest roadblock for us. The last time it was in front of the commissioners, gas was down to $1 a gallon. There was a list of projects that would be built on the agenda. It got voted down with the caveat that the government spending build roads is too inefficient. That's why they voted it down. So gas is down to $1 a gallon. You can't even get gas tax passed at that point in time. So you did in our county, because of whatever is back of their heads, it's very unlikely that in this climate we're going to get any relief. And to say we're like Orange County, totally different area. They sell so much gas out of state that they probably don't need to raise their local gas tax. They're just a wash in the amount of gallons they sell because of the amount of tourists that come to Orange County. We're not in the same league. We need that for our infrastructure, the advanced projects. But unless our commissioners get on board with it, it's not going to happen. I know in my district, Dr. Fisher did both, my local gas tax. But in other districts, he didn't. So writing letters, email, text them, do what you need to do. This is important, or it's not going to pass. You say, oh, we can't afford it.
And Pete, Mayor Demings, I think it was early January of 2020, he had a plan to go to the voters to raise the gas tax, and they had a big plan, and they had specific projects that they were going to go to the voters to say, hey, this is what we can get done. But then the pandemic hit, and that changed everything, and clearly he pulled back on that.
And, you know, I get the smell too that a lot of this money coming into the state is being alternate fuel infrastructure, because big push is climate change, go electric. So a lot of these dollars coming in aren't really going to go for our needs, go for fuel infrastructure. That's just a gut feeling I get.
Okay, any other questions for Georgiana? Seeing none, thank you, Georgiana.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is our 2021 priority projects process overview, and that'll be Sarah will give us that presentation.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Sarah Crom. I'm the Senior Transportation Planner. Each year, the Space Coast TPO develops a list of project priorities. The draft list of project priorities, or LOP, goes through the committees and the governing board, and it will be coming in July for adoption. And so what we wanted to do was give kind of an overview of the process that we've been under since January, and just the list of project priorities kind of in general, not actually going in and looking at where projects rank. In July, you'll receive the draft list for adoption. We're not quite there yet, but just kind of give a presentation to prep for the July meetings. So for those unfamiliar with the project priorities process and where they fit in our planning process is we start off with a long range transportation plan that's updated every 5 years. In that plan, projects are identified either for boxed funds, which basically is referring to our bicycle pedestrian master plan, ITS master plan, all of our kind of individual specialized plans. And then there's the cost feasible list that refers to your larger roadway projects and things like that. And basically, in order for a project to be eligible for the list of project priorities, it must be within that long-range transportation plan. So the development of that plan is really important because that's essentially what feeds into our list of project priorities. So after we've completed the LRTP, Local municipalities are then able to basically once a year during our call for projects, submit an application for a project to go on the law. And then eventually, as you guys just saw with the TIP amendment, projects will end up in the Transportation Improvement Program, which means that they are funded. There's actually money. So basically that's kind of the really high level life cycle of a project. Narrowing into that blue box, the project priorities process. Basically, we start off with a call for projects with our local municipalities. They can submit an application. We did have a number of applications submitted this year. It then goes into evaluation and ranking, which is the bubble that we're in right now. Then July, adoption of list of project priorities. We submit the LOP to FDOT. And then FDOT reviews the applications, vets and meets with the locals, basically trying to wash out what exactly is this project? Is it feasible at this time? What are all the little minor details? And then we work with FDOT to program the projects, meaning actually go, this is the project that we need to put X amount of funding on. That then leads into work program development. And then we get to the project actually being implemented either by FDOT or one of our local municipalities through the local agency program. To break that into what it looks like this year, we did our call for projects on January 11th. And we've now basically gone through the call for projects. We did something new this year. We had an environmental meeting where we met with our environmental partners to build a relationship with them, but also to have that discussion of, are there projects that you have projects that could be connected or be a partnership? Or are there projects that there's like a huge red flag, like there's no way this is going to be possible because of X, Y, and Z environmental impacts? And then we'll be going to our transportation subcommittee with the final ranking or to get a final ranking to bring us the draft here shortly. So what makes a project eligible? What projects actually can be submitted? Because this year we did have a number of applications of projects that were not eligible. And so those applications they are not being put on the project priority list. So the first thing is, as I was talking about, is it in the cost feasible component of the long range transportation plan? Next is it functionally classified to receive federal aid? Is the road even able to, or the project even able to receive federal funding? Is it ready to be implemented within the next 5 years? This is important because we don't want to have projects that are not ready for, let's say, stimulus money comes down. We want to be able to put that money on those projects and get them moving. We don't want projects that are placeholders of, oh, one day we want to do it. We want projects that are ready to go. Is the project consistent with the local government comprehensive plans? That doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be exactly specifically called out in your comp plans, but it needs to have been given local support and really have gone through your committees or boards in some way, shape, or form. This shows that it has local support, but it also gives an opportunity for the public to be informed and engaged, to know that this project exists. And then finally, if the project is off the state highway system, is the agency certified to perform a local agency program project? And so what that means is basically FDOT funnels the money through a LAP program, or the local agency program. And there's very strict guidelines. You have to, you're administering a grant. And so there's certain billing aspects and staffing aspects that are required. So some municipalities can't be LAP certified, but they can partner with a municipality that can be. So once we decide if the project is eligible, it goes into the ranking process. So right now we've completed the quantitative score, which is based on criteria. And the criteria is based around safety, transportation and land use, sustainability and resiliency, innovation, and multimodal. And these directly align with our governing board strategic plan. So it's all connected. This is the direction that we've been told to go. Now, we also recognize that data and black and white scoring doesn't always hit everything that goes into a project. We're not just building roadways and sidewalks, we're building communities and a better area for our citizens. So We have a qualitative score option that's based on consensus recommendation of the Transportation Subcommittee, which is made up of all the municipalities. And so essentially when we meet with that group in a couple weeks here, they can say, we feel like this roadway project should receive 10 qualitative scores based on various aspects that make it regionally significant. It can't just say, because we like the project. It's this project really is impactful and it really helps better our communities and in our region. And then finally, discretionary ranking, where in July, when we present this, any of our committees or boards has the opportunity to recommend to our governing board that a project needs to get discretionarily ranked, which we did do with Ellis Road last year. So that's the process. And these are the projects that, well, this isn't a full list of all the applications we received. This is in your agenda package. I know it's kind of small up on the screen, but these are the list of the new projects that are being added. The first two are not new projects. They're projects that have been previously taken off because of either they were fully funded previously, or they had been at the time it wasn't necessary to have it on the list. So those are the Traffic Management Center and the Space Coast Trail, which was unfunded this past work program cycle. The next are all new projects. State Road A1A, Volunteer Way to Roosevelt Ave. It's a design project for sidewalk and Satellite Beach. State Road A1A, 520 to International Drive. It's a complete street study in Cape Canaveral and a little bit of Cocoa Beach. State Road 520, Banana River Drive to State Road A1A. It is a vulnerability analysis for that causeway to figure out what is the future of that causeway and how can we best strengthen it for evacuation and resiliency. And then finally, Mitten Road, Jupiter Boulevard to Malabar Road. This was submitted by Palm Bay, a study in regards to widening that road. Right now, as it stands with our current draft, these are just kind of historically significant project priorities. These are the ones that have been at the top for years and years and years, and that we really are going to continue to focus in on, which is the Ellis Road widening, State Road 528 widening, the numerous State Road A1A projects, and then we've of course added the Traffic Management Center and Space Coast Trail back in. State Road 501 Clear Lake, Michigan Ave to Industry Road, and then State Road 514 Malabar Road, all portions. The kind of one of our final steps before we bring the list back to you is that the public will have an opportunity to review the list. We annually do this at our open house, and Abby will be telling you more about that during her report. So with that, I'll take any questions regarding our project priorities process.
Space Coast Trail, last time I talked, you said we built a trail here. Trail was removed. Kind of talking about now that the trail is back on. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Pete. All right.
Okay, any other questions for Sarah? Seeing none, thank you, Sarah.
All right.
Don't go away though.
I know, I can't go anywhere.
Next up is the Transportation Resiliency Master Plan. Once again, Sarah.
All right. So you do have a couple things in your agenda package before I get started. You do have the slides, and you also have a resiliency relay, which basically this is a 2-year project. And so we want to make sure that we are communicating to our partners throughout this process. And so occasionally these will pop up in your agenda package, and it just kind of goes over completed work, upcoming activities, and then my contact info. So in October 2020, we began the development of our first ever Transportation Resiliency Master Plan. If you recall the scope going through, and then we issued the notice to proceed. And essentially what we wanted to do is take this opportunity to give kind of background to it and educate and begin kind of an educational piece and let you know what's going on, because as I said, it's a 2-year project. And so eventually we're going to, in 2 years, a little less than 2 years now, ask you to approve and adopt the plan. And so we don't want to keep you in the dark throughout the process and for you not to understand what's going on. So we are at the beginning of the project, really. And so to give a little educational piece, what is resilience? We are working around the East Central Florida Regional Resiliency Collaborative definition of resilience. And that is the ability to bounce forward, absorb, recover, and get better in the face of short-term shocks like hurricanes or infrastructure failures, and long-term stressors like affordable housing, aging infrastructure, shifting economic trends, and climate change. So that is huge umbrella. So what we want to do is shrink into specifically transportation. And so we're thinking more along the lines of the ability of the transportation system to recover and regain functionality after a major disruption or disaster. We have to keep in mind that this is a transportation resiliency master plan, so that's the lens that we're working in. And so what we're doing is we're building on some previous work we've already done, as well as also regional work. And so, this really started in 2016 when staff began going to various workshops in regards to sea level rise planning. And that led to us doing our Space Coast TPO Sea Level Rise Vulnerability Assessment completed in February 2018. And that was really the conversation piece that we needed to get started in building resiliency into our planning. That led to sustainability and resiliency being an emphasis area in our governing board strategic plan, inclusion in our project prioritization methodology, as well as also inclusion in our 2045 long-range transportation plan. But we have to stop thinking of resiliency as a buzzword that we stick in plans and actually get down to what are the projects and what are the corridors and what are the shocks and stressors that actually matter. So that brings us to the Transportation Resiliency Master Plan. So the purpose is to develop a roadmap to a more resilient transportation system in Brevard. We'll identify shocks and stressors, prioritize roadways and corridors, and develop tools and tactics to actually use on those priority corridors. As I mentioned, it's a 2-year plan that began in October 2020. So in theory, we'll be adopting in October 22 or 2022. That's, obviously can be flexible with, as we all know, things can happen and sometimes things get off schedule. So once again, this is a transportation focus. So it has to answer a couple of questions. What puts people and infrastructure at risk? Which infrastructure is the most important to protect? And it also has to consider kind of influence areas, because the transportation system can be impacted on something that's not actually happening on the transportation system. Think about like, if we have a major storm event, there could be parts of US 1 flooded that there's a roadway between it, and parts of US 1, there's a roadway between US 1 and the Indian River. But if the flooding's bad enough, potentially we could impact another roadway. So we have to look big picture. We also have to make sure we're engaging everyone in the whole community in this process. So obviously engaging the board and committees. We also have developed a task force that has representation from all the municipalities and some other key players. We will be having focus groups that specifically are on the identified shocks and stressors. Key stakeholders, we've begun having stakeholder meetings. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Transportation disadvantaged. Who are the individuals that are already being impacted by some of these shocks and stressors because they don't have access to a vehicle. They don't have the same resources that we do. And of course, the general public. So the work so far, we've had our first task force meeting in January. We have our second one scheduled in a couple weeks here. We have developed a project website. We have had an environmental and an economic stakeholder meeting. And that's really important that we hit both of those, because in order to have a resilient transportation system, we need to be thinking about this from all sides. So we made sure to engage our economic and our business owners and that portion. So we want to make sure that goods and services are working functionally. And then we also want to involve our environmental groups and also our community at large. So we had those stakeholder groups, and they were really interesting. And we learned things that we would have never known if we hadn't just taken the time to sit down and talk to them. Data, we've done tons of data collection analysis, and we've also done a transportation disadvantage analysis and area identification, taking basically various census data such as over the age of 65, under the age of 10, households without a car, et cetera, and kind of started honing in on where are those populations within the county. Another big item that we've been working on is public involvement. And this is just one of the graphics that Abby developed for it. If you were watching our slideshow before the meeting started, there were others. And so what we've been doing is we developed goals and objectives and performance measures. This is a different kind of plan. It's not our go out there, do a bunch of surveys and get a bunch of public input, because, and I'll show you in the next slide, is we feel and we have recognition that when no one really, resiliency is a new word to a lot of people. So you say resiliency and they're like, they kind of know what it means. They kind of think about what it means. And then you add, even more syllables with transportation resiliency, and it can be intimidating. So we want to make sure before we are getting in public input, they know what we're talking about and we're communicating effectively to them. So our goals are to educate about resiliency, disseminate information, and get high-level feedback and input at this time. So we've developed the website. We're going to start doing quarterly social media campaigns. We just finished our first one. We did it for April, the resiliency relays, and then we've started doing some community outreach, such as I spoke at the Titusville Chamber, and then I also presented at the first ever East Central Florida Regional Resilience Collaborative Summit. As part of our first social media campaign, we conducted some online surveying. That really the goal of it was to figure out how familiar is the public with resiliency and transportation resiliency, and how concerned are they? And so these are some snapshots from next door. And the one with the yellow is how familiar are you with the concept of transportation resiliency? 67% said, what's that? So obviously, we know that we need to do a better job at educating about what is transportation resiliency. Then a couple weeks later, we did another one that said, how concerned are you about our transportation system's resiliency? And 54% said vital to our community. So obviously it's looking like, and we also had a vast jump in number of people that contributed to the surveys. So obviously it's something that's beginning to interest people, and but they don't quite know what it is yet. So that's what we're hoping to change. So that goes into our next step, which is obviously continuing that public outreach and education. We are going to start our community conversations with transportation disadvantaged groups. We have our first one on Wednesday. Task force meeting number 2 later this month. And in that, we are going to define which are the top shocks and stressors that we need to focus on. Because we could look at every shock and stressor possible, but we want to narrow it in on the 6 or less that are the most impactful to our community. And then we want to begin having focus groups to discuss those shocks and stressors, and finally start working on the corridor analysis. So with that, I will take any questions about where we're at with the Transportation Resiliency Master Plan.
Pete?
Sarah, you came up with what is transportation resilience. It's it in a nutshell, which is trying to do the best I've heard yet.
Well, thank you.
Before I saw this, all over the place, global warming, ice melting, beaches flooding. You got it down in a nutshell. What you're trying to do is get a road back in service, get people in and out of flooded areas as quick as possible, and some good real world doable goals. And I really, really like to see what you're doing. And you're playing with the gigantic drainage. What's been going in the water? When is it going to go in the water? How long is it going to stay in the water? And how the hell do we get out of here? How long is it spread water?
And it's not just water, is we have to think beyond, water. It's
You're up to your neck.
well, thank you.
And Pete, I just wanted to mention, talking about threats, funding is, in my opinion, is a threat to the transportation system. So it does look at all the different elements of it, because it's something that we got to figure out, but that's very good.
Drainage engineer, they always look local.
Mhm.
They always do drainage from small little local area. But when you have all these little satellites put together in a big area, now the water go where you don't expect it to. Places are underwater, they've never been underwater before. And with all the development that we've got going on right now, what's the big underwater zone?
Yeah.
And that's what we got to figure out, and then we're trying to come up with safety, move people in and out of there, so the water goes down, and safe to go back home. Got to get them someplace that's safe, feed them, shelter, and all that. That's a doable goal. Like I said,
Well, I'm treading water over here, Pete. Don't worry, I won't drown.
Guy,
For those comments.
Guy,
I noticed here in the web, you actually asked me about cybersecurity systems. Events the last week have revealed a new way that transportation can impact by cybersecurity, and that all the people who stuff have to shut down. I just want to make sure that you, as you move forward, that is a real unknown. Even
Absolutely.
people that think they know cybersecurity.
Yeah.
They think, if I scan the systems, I'm good. If scanning the systems, it's too late, and that's what has happened.
So we right now are working with about a list of 20 shocks and stressors to consider for almost which ones are going to make the cut. And so that is on the long list. Because there's so many unknowns, I kind of feel like at this time, it would almost be silly for us to make all these wild guesses in regards to cybersecurity and smart transportation, intelligence transportation, as well as also Steve's working on the ITS master plan, which really has the opportunity to incorporate that aspect in a more comprehensive way than we could in this plan. But I think it's really important that we keep that in our forefront, and we definitely have to monitor that as it develops. So thank you for bringing it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right, anyone else? Tony?
Thank you, Philip. And Sarah, thank you. Great presentation as always. And Guy's right. It's a real concern. I was in the maritime industry and talking to Coast Guard and other folks, and for the last several years, cybersecurity is their number one concern for all things. Just think, the power grid and it's cut off 2 months later, what happens? Nobody needs to come here and do anything. We're going to do it to ourselves, unfortunately, if we lose power that long. It's really scary stuff, the scenarios that they draw out. So that wasn't what I wanted to comment on. I wanted to ask about the task force and the stakeholders. Are they in this package? I didn't see who's on there. And if not, can we get find out who they are and where they're from?
Absolutely. I can send out the full task force list. It doesn't display well on a slide because it's about 50 plus people. And so just off the top of my head, Cocoa Beach is Jared Francis.
Oh, good. Okay. Great.
But it's not just the municipalities, as we have DEP, we have the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. It's a wide array of stakeholders.
Are they mostly the tech side?
Yeah, they're mostly technical side.
Okay.
So what we want from the task force is to be our guiding committee. And so we don't want to outline something that from a city or an organization's perspective is something that's unfeasible to accomplish. And so they're really there to represent ultimately what projects could get done and what they're hearing from their communities, so that we can kind of consolidate the number of people engaging.
And that makes a lot of sense. And I think every new project that we're working on, we need to consider all of that. You know,
Mhm.
if we're doing a new roadway, does it need to be elevated? And if so, what do you do with stormwater? What do you do with sewer? What do you do with electric lines? You know, the old thing was, let's underground the electric lines. Well, if we've got water issues like we do in South Florida very soon, like St. Augustine area, you're looking at longer term loss of power because it's underground, it's harder to work on. So you got a lot of different issues to consider. So I really am glad we're working on that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Michelle?
This is awesome, Sarah. Very, very glorious.
Excuse me, would you mind using your mic? I have people online that can't hear. Sorry.
I think what you're doing is really great, and I'm so happy that, you know, we're way far into this. The other, just a little footnote, not only about this task force, to Tony's point, but most of the cities are a little bit ahead of Brevard County,
Absolutely.
and they already have sustainability or resiliency plans, have done a lot of data collection and studies on vulnerable areas. And a lot of that is surprising because it is intuitively opposite of what you would think if you had to guess. So it's really good to see the integration, either by virtue of the task force or by your staff, looking at those plans and trying to integrate them. Is there really a formal effort to do that? Will you be the umbrella, or are you just looking at your unincorporated areas versus, I mean, are we isolating things or are we really integrating things is my whole question.
We're integrating things. I don't want to
Right.
say that we're taking all of the, you know, there's, I want to say about 12, maybe it's only 11 resilient / sustainable plans throughout. And Brevard is finally doing Resilient Brevard.
Yeah, it's great.
And so I don't want to say that we're integrating those, but we're using them as a tool.
Good.
And so, because obviously there's, you know, like for example, I believe it's Indian Harbors has a huge piece discussing, you know, native plants. And it's like that necessarily, yes, that can be a tool with transportation, but that doesn't necessarily, you know, it doesn't define the whole plan kind of thing. Like there's aspects within those plans that aren't relevant. And so we're using them as a tool. Yeah.
For example, Satellite Beach, you know, our vulnerability areas are South Patrick Drive.
Yeah.
And if we lose South Patrick Drive, that's one of the entrances into the base.
Yeah.
And to Pineda and to O'Galley and, you know, Melbourne. So, you know, that's a real vulnerability area that will take coordination among the cities and the county because it's all of you.
It's always, I've always found it really, really interesting. Like when we did the Sea Level Rise vulnerability assessment, is everyone thinks sea level rise, it's going to be A1A is just going to be wiped out. And it's really, we have a lot of riverine flooding coming in that is going to be more impactful. And so that's a great point about South Patrick Drive.
Thank you.
Okay, Pete?
I'm gonna try and help you out a little here. Airport Road in Sanford, it's a flat area. They went from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. Because it's relatively flat, you can only move water through the pipes so fast. So you get a 2 or 3 inch rain, and whether you like it or not, Airport Boulevard is going to be underwater for 3 or 4 hours, effectively shutting down the road. You get a major storm that comes through like Bay, and Airport Boulevard could be underwater for days. I know 46 out there on the St. Johns River was underwater for a couple months. But to elevate Airport Boulevard, to bring in that kind of dirt, to elevate it to a level for where it wouldn't be underwater, would make the project no longer economically feasible. And that's kind of the balancing act that we have here. We have big flat areas that drain very, very slow and are going to go underwater. in heavy rains and tropical rain, because that's just nature of elevation. You have to move water in hills and valleys, and on the flat plain, that's hard to do. And that's kind of what you're working on. Okay, we know the road's gonna be in the water in these areas. How do we work around it? Do I have the right picture?
Yeah, exactly. But you know, as Georgiana mentioned, it won't just be flooding. It'll be other shocks and stressors as well. But yeah, absolutely. What are the roadways that are going to be underwater and be significant, and how do we combat those? And we're not going to answer every question. You know,
Flooding is one of the things that we have to deal with because of the economic scale of construction. So if we know we have to deal with the flooding.
flooding is 100% something that we deal with now.
You're coming in with a plan. Know it's gonna flood. Now,
Yeah.
how do we get these people food, shelter, get them food and shelter until the storm passes? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions? I have one question for you, Sarah.
Yep.
Is there anyone on the task force, or have you been in contact with anyone with the Melbourne-Tillman Water Control District?
Yep.
Who have you spoken to?
Oh my goodness, Mike
McCabe.
McCabe. Thank
He's
you. I
on-
was still trying to remember his last
I'm
name.
president of the board of directors.
Yeah.
Why I asked that.
So, yeah, Mike is on our task force.
Super, okay.
Yeah, and so he's engaged. He's great. We've worked with him on numerous projects, so
great.
we're happy to have him.
All right, thank you, Sarah.
Yep.
Okay, moving on. Next up is our DOT, Florida Transportation Department report. Do we have Ms. Hinson with us?
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you. In regards to the report from the Department of Transportation, the information, excuse me, that you have there on the screen in regards to the joint certification, just wanted to mention, in regards to the joint, actually in the title, the name says joint certification. And from the department's perspective, we've tried to move towards incorporating more of a dialogue and not just a monologue from the department, but we've tried to invest time and energy in making it more of a collaborative effort. We'd like to also commend the Space Coast TPO and a job well done. We've had no findings in regards to the certification. Since the time that the certification meeting was held, we've also had several meetings with the directors in our region, and we're trying to form, I think Georgiana explained it very specifically earlier, that, you know, we've tried to be more transparent in our dealings and in our information, and trying to put forth a more collaborative effort. And in that respect, we'd just like to commend the TPO on a job well done with their certification, the annual certification that happened earlier this year. As in regards to other information, there's also a construction report that's included in your packet of information that gives you information regarding upcoming and current projects in your TPO region. And just like to say thank you in regards to the passing or the adoption of the tip letter that was presented earlier. And that concludes our information.
Okay, are there any questions for Ms. Hinson? Seeing none, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next up is our Bike Ped Committee report. And I don't have that on my. Page 1?
91.
Yeah. Okay, if you'll turn to page 91 in your agenda package, there's the item number 8A of the DOT report, and we will need a motion to adopt it. Motion from Tony, do we have second? Second from Arlen, any discussion of it? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Lisa. Now to our Bike Ped report. Once again, Sarah.
All right. So Our last formal meeting of the Bicycle Pedestrian Trails Advisory Committee was March 29th. The meeting had no significant action items, so we did hold it exclusively virtual as informational purposes only. We had a member showcase presentation from one of our members, Murray Hahn, an FDOT work program recap presentation. So if you recall, back in February, you had the FDOT work program presentation, and basically we narrowed that down to just discussing the bike ped projects. And then FDOT D5 is currently developing a bicycle and pedestrian master plan. So they provided an update on that plan development. On April 26th, we held our annual walking workshop. Big shout out to Melbourne, specifically Tammy Gillen and Todd Corwin for hosting us on Hickory Street. It was a really nice evening for our BPAC members to learn more about the project and walk the complete street. Also, May is National Bike Month. Please visit www.bikeleague.org/bike month for more information. And then finally, we did conduct our 2 ADA bus stop trainings recently. We had one in person, it was here. And then we also had one online last week. The online version has been recorded and added to our YouTube. So if you missed that presentation, you can access it from our YouTube. You can also go to our ADA bus stop webpage as well. And that concludes my report.
Okay, any questions for Sarah? Steve?
There are a group of bicyclists at Sunrise Bakery in Titusville, and they said they were from Deland. And well, did you have to travel on many streets? They said, no, this one little section on Maytown, which is being developed right now. So talking to them, they can go on bike trails all the way from Deland to Titusville, except one little section that you say is currently under construction.
Yes. They're having the ribbon cutting for that section. I want to say either later this month or early June. I actually have the email in my email right now that has an invite to the ribbon cutting. So yeah, it'll be very shortly here. They'll be able to completely get from Titusville through all the way up to DeLand. And I believe it's even a little bit further now.
DeBerry, and you should be able to get to Sanford.
Mm-hmm.
If now I've been as far as Osteen, and that's enough for me.
But we're really filling in those gaps of the St. Johns River to Sea Loop and the Coast to Coast Trail and the East Coast Greenway and those huge major regional trails. And it's an exciting time to be working in trails right now and to be riding trails.
Well, my legs aren't that powerful. That's a spandex and a $1,200 to $5,000 bicycle crowd. But hey, I mean, they're clipping at 20, 25 miles an hour. They can cover some distance.
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Any other questions on the bike ped report? Once again, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Next up is our public engagement report. Abby's waiting in the wings.
Good afternoon. I'm Abby Hemingway, and I'm the Public Involvement Officer for the Space Coast TPO. And today we're going to be talking about some public involvement opportunities coming up in the next few months. But before we jump into that, I did want to highlight a couple of wins that our organization has had in the last few months. So first, at the end of March, TPO staff partnered with FDOT District 5 and Alert Today Florida to promote Bike Month. We coordinated a safety education pop-up event on the US 192 corridor down near Melbourne Square Mall, and staff and volunteers were stationed along the roadway holding signs to remind drivers to look right for bicyclists. They were also inside the mall speaking with shoppers. We were able to operate as a visual cue to drivers that day to look for bicyclists and to share the road. The event actually led to an extended relationship with the mall, which agreed to showcase our bicycle safety literature within their table inserts in the food court. The event was a huge success, and it was a great example of how partnership is so vital when we're educating the public. So there's just a little collage of us during that day. It was really, really fun to get out on the road again and to see people in person and to speak with pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists that day. And then in April, the TPO received an Image Award from the Space Coast chapter of the Florida Public Relations Association for its 2020 Mitten Road Feasibility Study virtual public meeting that was held last August. The local Image Awards competition is conducted annually to recognize outstanding public relations programs and to encourage and promote the development of PR professionalism in our area. This award recognized the TPO submission as the top scoring entry for the public relations program, and it was a great way to celebrate the end of the study. Thank you. So moving on to things happening this month and in June, as Sarah mentioned earlier, May is National Bike Month. So we are partnering with the American League of Bicyclists to celebrate biking as transportation, recreation, and as essential to our well-being of everyday lives. We know that whether you bike for fun, for fitness, or with your family, to shop or to work, it's part of our movement for safer streets, connected communities, and a healthier planet and people. And if you just want to take a note of this, one special day this month is going to be Bike to Work Day on May 21st. So you may see more bicyclists that day out on the roadways. And then also happening in May is Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month. It coincides with Bike Month. And it's probably to no one's surprise that motorcyclists are significantly overrepresented in traffic crashes and fatalities every year. In 2019 alone, there were over 5,000 motorcyclists killed on our highways in the US. That accounted for 14% of the total highway fatalities that year. So this month, we'll be promoting safety messages with our partners to raise awareness that motorists should be looking twice for motorcycles. We'll also be highlighting the importance of motorcyclists wearing DOT compliant helmets. And other social media spotlights that we will be highlighting this week is National Police Week. So please make sure you give your local agency a little shout out. And then next week is National EMS Week. And of course, Memorial Day at the end of this month. We always promote safe driving during holidays, and also we'll be paying remembrance. And then coming up in June, as Georgiana mentioned earlier, on June 3rd from 10 to 11 a.m. online, we will be hosting our Transportation Thursday webinar, and she will be focusing on partnerships and coordination with the Florida Department of Transportation. And we will be sending out that registration information next week in our newsletter. If you do not receive our newsletter, please see me afterwards so I can get you signed up. And we will also be posting it to our website as well. And then to close out for June, we have our open house on Wednesday, June 16th, beginning at 5:30 p.m. This year's open house will be virtual once again. We saw a huge spike in attendance last year when we offered it virtual. I think it's just a little bit more convenient for public citizens to attend. And so for those who have never attended our annual open house before, this is an opportunity to discuss trending projects in Brevard and the proposed 2022-26 Transportation Improvement Program. This is a chance where public can share their thoughts on the transportation projects for the next 5 years. We'll also be chatting about how new aspects of transportation planning are transforming the ways that we work, play, and live in our communities. And that's all I have.
Okay, any questions for Abby? Rochelle?
I'm not sure. Trainable. I'm not sure that that this question really is for you, but it does deal with public involvement. And I apologize if somebody has said it or it's been, shown somewhere. When is the ACER public workshop going to be? It was, I think it was in the materials that it was going to be spring 2021, and I'm just curious.
Oh, sorry, I do not believe it has been officially scheduled yet. So Jeanette Scott with Brevard County, someone asked me about it a few weeks ago, and at that time it had not been scheduled. As soon as it is, we definitely want to get that information out there because we feel that it'll be a lot of people are going to be interested in it. So I'll keep you posted on that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay. Yep. Any other questions for Abby? Seeing none, thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is transit report with Terry.
Good afternoon, everyone. Terry Jordan, Space Coast Area Transit. Brief update on activities by Space Coast Area Transit. The last couple of times I've come before you, I've talked about new service and ITS projects and want to just give a brief update on those two things. So April 3rd, we launched our 3 new routes, being the Central Titusville Route 10, the Port St. John Route 11, and the hourly headway along the beach side on Route 30. Each of the routes are doing fairly well with, excuse me, the Route 30 is performing as we expected and continues to outperform some of our other routes. But as far as the service itself, we're looking at tweaking that route to make sure that it can operate on the headway that we've designed for it. Route 10 and 11, brand new routes. We're watching those as well. 10 is struggling a little bit, but we're working toward increasing that ridership with outreach. And Route 11 in Route 10 in Central Titusville is doing pretty good. As I mentioned, the ITS, we have launched the application and the website available to our passengers so they can see where the bus is located at any point in time the bus is in service on the route. You can pull it up on your phone, your tablet, your computer, and see exactly where the bus is located on the route and determine when it will arrive at your stop. Also see when it will reach a desired stop, and also you can receive alerts in advance of when the bus is going to arrive at your designated location that you set for it to get alerted for. In addition to that, we also launched the contactless mobile fare payment so the passenger can avoid having to stand at their fare box and pay the fare. They just pretty much load the fare payment onto their smart device, show the phone when they get on the bus, and the operator sees the things that I mentioned before, the pulsating ring and the time. And that is considered a fare, and they board the bus in 2 seconds. They're going to their seat. So we're very excited about those things. We're going to be doing some additional outreach to our passengers. We did the first ones last Friday at Hammock Landing and at Titusville Shopping Center. Kim Smith attended with us and is also going to attend some future ones with us, also collaborate and help us get that information out to our passengers. And next Friday, we'll be doing the Shepherd Park Transit Center and, Transit Stop and Cocoa Beach Cocoa Transit Center, excuse me. Overall ridership for the service itself continues to be about 75% or so where it was prior to the pandemic. However, last month, March, was the highest ridership we've seen since the pandemic started. We were at roughly about 136,000 riders, which is still, like I mentioned, pretty good, but it's almost where we were prior to pandemic. It's the highest that we've seen in over a year at this point. The applications, if you're interested in viewing the apps, especially if you're interested in seeing the information on where the transit routes are as they're operating, you can go to our website, 321transit.com. And you click on the Where's My Bus icon. You can see the bus traveling on the specified route that you desire. And you can also see the mobile fare payment app and how to link to it if you want to use the service using a mobile fare as well. Or you can feel free to pass that information on to anyone that you're talking to regarding transit. Those are the highlights of everything that we've been doing recently, unless there are any questions.
Pete,
Yeah, Terry, that Route 10 in Titusville, on paper, it looked really, really good. The amount of neighborhoods, services that it would take the residents to, and you said it's struggling a little, and you're going to try and do outreach to increase the ridership.
Yeah, well, it's only started in April, and right now it's about 700 plus for the month of April. So we're looking to increase that ridership overall, but as you mentioned, we believe it's a very good service area and bring a lot of people that did not have previous transit service to areas that they can connect to service and then come on into Cocoa and further points, or go up to Minns and things like that.
And getting the word out is where you're kind of having like a stumbling block a little bit.
Well, that's why we're doing our additional outreach now. But, for those passengers that may live or work along the route, it's harder to get the information to them remotely, so to speak. So unless they were out there, it's harder to or notify them that there's a service available to them until they see the bus going down the road. Interestingly enough, prior to putting the service in, we got a lot of calls about bus stops being at places that people didn't want them. So the word was getting out, but it was for individuals that were not concerned about using the service.
I was looking for news on the hometown news that they pass out free in North Brevard. And I didn't see any mention of it in the hometown news. And I'm just putting that out.
Thanks a lot for putting it out there. We have a marketing agency, so I'll make sure to point that out for additional information being disseminated in the future. Or even about this one going out to maybe one of the next times it's give to the community.
I mean, they should give you a big shout out on those 2 new moves you have in Titusville, and it shouldn't cost anything.
We would hope so. I'll definitely mention that for sure.
Any other questions for Terry? Greg?
Yeah, Terry, on your ITS system,
Yes, sir.
have you been able to run any reports as far as specific stop, ridership on, off for a complete route yet?
What I've requested is that we actually, so I looked at the information actually in regards to one of the questions you had previously on, we were discussing the shelters being installed in the Cocoa area, and I'm actually looking at high use areas. The thing that we're having to do now is validate the information that's being given back to us from the automated passenger counter. One of the things that I'm seeing currently is there's a big variance between the ons and the offs. So they're actually, so they're going through the process now to make sure that the counts are accurate. And once that happens, I'll be able to distribute information. So what I am actually doing is looking at the what it's reporting back on the various buses to make sure we're getting accurate information before I distribute anything.
Excellent. What I would be looking for when you're at that point is to be able to set up a baseline of information for, City of Cocoa. And then from that, we can compare that over time, 6 months, 12 months, and see where we're going so we can work with Abby and Brian on prioritizing the stop improvements, the ADA improvements, et cetera.
Oh, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Terry? Tony?
Yeah, thank you. Hey, Terry. Hey, you were talking about March. Did ridership drop off in April, or you just don't have those numbers yet?
I don't have that full report as yet. I actually just had some quick information regarding the 3 routes that I just mentioned, but overall April ridership is not available yet.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Next up is a local government report. Does anyone have anything regarding their local municipalities? Greg?
Yeah, I just wanted to pass on, the other day, FDOT come out to have a PD&E study public meeting at the Cocoa Civic Center. They came out, made an excellent presentation of the options for the widening of State Route 524 from Industry Road out to just past 95. They had some detailed information. I was a little disappointed at the public turnout. I did my part to try and get some folks out to look at drawings and plans, but I was glad to see that they're showing and taking input. And at this point, I think that's really what we need to do, is get them input on the plans that we can see along 524. For those not familiar, there are approximately 1,000 apartment units going in on the south side of 524 that have been approved as of right now. So it's a high growth area.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Anyone else? Seeing none, just a reminder, our next meeting will be Wednesday on July 7th. We're returning to our joint meetings with the TAC, so it'll be at 9:30 in the morning. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.